My name is Erin, and before I tell you what my parents refused me, you need to understand how easily they said yes to her. If you've ever been the child who learned early exactly how little it takes for love to become conditional, tell me in the comments. Share this story. And please, watch until the end, because the thing I sent them years later still sits unpaid on my kitchen table. My sister Claire was always the plan. Not a plan, the plan. At dinner, my parents didn't ask how I was. They asked if Claire needed anything. Every conversation bent toward her future like gravity. They called it investing. They said it with pride, like good parents were measured by how much they poured into the child who promised the highest return. Claire announced her acceptance into the master's program on a Sunday afternoon. We were sitting around my parents' dining table, oak wood polished so obsessively it reflected our faces back at us. My mother clasped her hands before Claire even finished speaking. "They want me in September," Claire said, smiling like she already belonged somewhere better. "It's competitive. International faculty. Expensive, though." My father didn't hesitate. "We'll make it work." No numbers discussed, no size, no qualifications. My mother leaned forward. "Of course we'll pay. You shouldn't start your future with debt." Claire didn't argue. She never did. She just nodded, already accustomed to doors opening. I pushed my fork through my food, listening to them build her life out loud. Tuition, housing, living expenses, conferences, networking trips abroad. 250,000, give or take, my father said casually. But it's worth it. Worth it. I tested the word in my mouth, like maybe it would taste different if I said it out loud. I didn't ask for anything then. I didn't need to. Back then, asking felt pointless. You can only knock so many times on a door that stays closed before you stop believing it opens at all. "Erin, isn't that amazing?" my mother asked me, smiling, already halfway turned back to Claire. "Yeah," I said. "It is." Claire glanced at me. "You're quiet." "I'm listening." "Don't worry," she laughed. "I'll take care of you when I'm rich." Everyone chuckled. I didn't, because I already knew the punchline. I'd lived inside it my whole life. Claire was ambition. I was the detour. Claire was possibility. I was what happened when you chose something less impressive. "You were never competitive," my father once told me. Not angrily. Worse. Factually. "Claire needs more support. You're independent." Independent. That was their favorite word for me. It sounded admirable, but it really meant unattended. As they talked numbers that afternoon, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a reminder from the clinic confirming my son's evaluation. I didn't check it. I wasn't ready to say his name here yet. Not at that table. Not while the spotlight shone so brightly on the child they'd already chosen. Claire's voice filled the room. "I don't want to worry about money while I study." "You won't," my mother promised immediately. "You focus on being exceptional." Exceptional. I watched them nod in agreement, watched the certainty in their faces, realized something then with brutal clarity. My parents didn't decide to support Claire. It was assumed. Automatic. A reflex. They never once asked what I might need, never asked if I was managing, never noticed my hands gripping my glass too hard when the total climbed higher. Later, as we stood to leave, my mother hugged Claire. "This is your time." Then she turned to me. "You'll be fine, won't you?" I smiled because that's what I always did. "Yeah," I said. "I always am." She kissed my cheek and let go. And as I walked out of that house, listening to them laugh behind me about international flights and tuition deadlines, I had no idea that years later, I would ask them for something so small compared to what they handed her, without blinking. $5,000. For words. For my child to speak. And they would look at me and say no. The pediatrician didn't look surprised when she said it. She folded her hands on the desk, slid the report toward me, and spoke in the same tone people use when they think they're being gentle. "He's falling behind in expressive speech," she said, Not dramatically. Not yet. But early intervention matters. I stared at the paper like it might rearrange itself into something less terrifying. How early? I asked. Now, she replied. Now is early. My son sat beside me on the vinyl chair, swinging his legs. He was 3. He loved trucks. He said instead of more. He pressed his forehead into my arm when strangers talk too fast. He understands everything, I said quickly. He just needs time. She nodded. Understanding is good, but speech is a muscle. If we don't work it, it stiffens. I swallowed. How much? She hesitated. That pause told me everything. About 5,000, she said. For the first stretch. Private therapy. Weekly sessions. $5,000. I thought of the oak table. The casual, give or take. The way my father said 250,000 like it was a grocery estimate. On the drive home, my son slept in his car seat with his mouth open. I tried saying his name out loud, softly, like practice. When we got home, I opened my budget spreadsheet, then my savings, then my credit cards. I waited 3 days before calling my parents. 3 days of rehearsing the words so they wouldn't sound like begging. My mother answered on the second ring. Erin, she said brightly. I was just telling Claire about the alumni dinner. Hi, Mom. I took a breath. Do you have a minute? Of course. I wanted to ask you something. I heard my father in the background. Who is it? Erin, she said. She has a question. My chest tightened. It's about my son, I said, forcing myself to keep my voice even. He's been evaluated. He needs speech therapy. There was silence. Heavy. Calculating. How serious? My father asked. Enough that the doctor recommended starting immediately. And insurance? It doesn't cover most of it. Another pause. Shorter this time. Impatient. I wouldn't ask unless it mattered, I said. It's 5,000, just to start. 5,000. I made sure to say it clearly. Not apologetically. Not dramatically. My mother sighed. Oh, Erin. My father cut in. You chose to have kids. There it was. Not raised, not shouted. Delivered like a conclusion. I know, I said. I'm not saying I didn't. That comes with responsibility, he continued. We can't bankroll every decision. I felt something crack open in my chest, sharp and clean. This isn't a vacation, I said. It's therapy. We helped Claire because education is an investment, my mother said. This is different. Different. So his ability to speak isn't an investment? I asked. Silence again. This one longer. Maybe you can wait, she said finally. Kids catch up. The word maybe landed like a dismissal. I can't wait, I said. That's the point. My father exhaled. Already done. Erin, you're always so emotional. I laughed once. It slipped out before I could stop it. I watched you write checks for $250,000, I said. No discussion, no hesitation. And I'm asking for 2% of that. That was different, my mother repeated. Her voice was tight now. How? I pressed. Explain it to me. No one answered. Then he said it again, slower. You chose to have kids. As if that absolved them of everything else. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt myself go cold. Okay, I said quietly. That's it? My mother asked. That's it. Erin. I won't ask again, I said. I just wanted to know. Know what? My father asked. I hung up. That night, I sat on my son's bedroom floor while he pushed a toy truck into the wall and said bam, over and over. I repeated the word back to him, clear, slow. Bam, I said. He grinned. Bah. I blinked, hard. $5,000. That was the price they put on his voice. And 8 years later, when they needed help speaking to me, I remembered that number perfectly. No one tells you how long 8 years feels when every month is an emergency. It doesn't arrive all at once. It stacks, quietly, like unpaid bills you don't open anymore because you already know what they say. The first speech therapist worked out of a rented office above a dental clinic. Beige walls, a plastic clock that ticked too loudly. She knelt in front of my son and said his name slowly, like we were coaxing something fragile into existence. Say it with me, she told him. Ma. Son. He frowned. May. That's okay. She smiled. We'll try again. I paid in installments. Late fees, credit cards. I stopped buying things that weren't necessary and then stopped buying things that were. When money ran short, I skipped sessions and told myself it was temporary. Temporary stretched. At 4, he pointed instead of spoke. At 5, he learned to stay quiet when other kids laughed. By 6, teachers started using words like delay and intervention and impact, like they were warnings. Does his family practice with him at home? One asked over a folded file. I do, I said. Constantly. She smiled thinly. Support matters. I wanted to tell her how expensive support was. I wanted to tell her who decided not to offer it. My parents never asked. They called on holidays, birthdays, always quick, always distracted. How's Claire? My mother would ask herself halfway through the call. She's in Switzerland this month. Did you know that? No, I'd say. I didn't. She's presenting her research. We're so proud. Of course they were. They never asked how my son spoke. They never noticed when he hid behind my legs at family gatherings. They chalked it up to shyness. He'll grow out of it, my father said once, waving it away. Boys are lazy talkers? Lazy. At 7, my son came home with a drawing. Stick figures. All of them talking except one. That's you? I asked gently. No, he said after a pause. That's me quiet. The word caught in his teeth. Qui. Yet. I drove to work that night in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I started working doubles. Nights. Weekends. Meanwhile, Claire sent links. Look at my graduation photos. Got another fellowship. Mom and Dad are helping me buy furniture. Once, she texted, you should bring him to more social settings. Kids learn by exposure. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. We're doing everything we can. That was true. It was also the loneliest sentence I'd ever written. At 8, the therapist looked at me after a session and said quietly, he's smart. He just needs consistency. Consistency cost money. That year, I overheard my parents on speakerphone telling a neighbor, we've given so much to our girls. Girls? Plural. I laughed so hard I scared my son. No, it's funny, I told him, wiping my eyes. Just funny. Every milestone came with a price tag. Every delay felt like my fault, even though I knew better. I practiced sounds in grocery store aisles. I corrected gently. Repeated, endlessly. At 9, he finally said my name clearly. Mom. 1 syllable. Perfect. I cried in the parking lot for 10 minutes afterward. There was no one to call and tell. By then, Claire had a title. A network. Parents who visited her office and took photos under her nameplate. My mother called me that night. Did you see Claire's article? She asked immediately. I paused. No. Oh. Well, she's doing very well. I waited. Seconds stretched. And you? She added, almost as an afterthought. Everything okay? I thought about the bills, the therapy binders, the boy asleep in the next room, privately rehearsing words before daring to say them out loud. Yeah, I said. We're managing. I hung up and stared at the wall. They never saw the nights I chose groceries over therapy and then hated myself for it. They never saw my son learn silence before he learned speech. They never saw what $5,000 could have changed if it had arrived on time. 8 years passed, not because it had to, but because that was how long it took for them to need something from me. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were my light days, the ones where I pretended life was almost normal. I had just finished folding laundry when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Mom. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Erin, she said, too carefully. Her voice had that thin, polite layer people use when they don't want to sound desperate. Are you busy? No, I said. What's wrong? Nothing. That was the first lie. Well, she began, your father and I have been talking. I waited. We're looking ahead, she continued. Planning. Retirement things. I could hear my father breathing faintly in the background. Listening. Always listening. And? I said. There was a pause long enough for me to picture them sitting side by side, rehearsed, paper spread out, numbers circled in red. We may need a little help, she said finally. A little. With what? I asked. Well, everything. My father jumped in suddenly. Healthcare costs. Housing as we get older. It's not easy living on a fixed income. Fixed. I pictured airline tickets, graduation dinners, international accommodations, that oak table, still shining. How much help? I asked. Another pause. It's not about numbers, my mother said quickly. It's about family. Family. The word twitched something loose inside me. So Claire isn't helping? I asked. Silence. Sharp this time. She's still settling into her career, my father said defensively. Student loans, unstable income. I almost laughed. You paid for her degree, I said. Not accusatory, just factual. That was different, my mother said automatically, like a reflex they never trained out of her. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. And my son's therapy wasn't? I asked. No one spoke. The quiet stretched until it became something else. Memory, maybe. We really just want to make sure we're comfortable, my mother said. Secure. Secure. I see, I said. We raised you, my father added. We sacrificed. I thought of him saying you chose to have kids like it was a verdict. What kind of help are you expecting? I asked. Well, my mother said, exhaling, monthly contributions would be ideal. Nothing extreme. Just support. Support. The word tasted familiar. Bitter. I'll need to think about it, I said. My mother rushed in. Of course. Take your time. There's no pressure. But there was. It crackled through the line, loud and urgent. Before hanging up, she said softly, we always knew you'd be the reliable one. Reliable. I hung up and stood in my kitchen alone, staring at the wall where last year's therapy schedule still hung. Dates circled. Sessions crossed out when money ran out. I didn't call back. I didn't text. Instead, I opened the filing cabinet beneath the sink. Therapy invoices. Bank statements. Payment plans. 8 years of swallowed anger printed neatly on paper. I sat on the floor and spread them out, one by one, until the kitchen tile disappeared under proof. That night, my father texted, just checking in. Hope everything's okay. I didn't reply. I waited 3 days, then 4. And when I finally made my decision, I didn't pick up the phone. I went to the post office. The clerk didn't look at me when she weighed it. She slid the envelope onto the scale, tapped numbers into the screen, and said, certified or standard. Certified, I said. No hesitation. It felt appropriate that someone had to sign for it. The envelope was thick, off-white, ordinary. I'd chosen it deliberately. No notes on the front, no handwriting flair that hinted at emotion, just their address. Clean, legible, unavoidable. Inside, I didn't organize the papers neatly. I didn't soften the blow with context or explanation. I let the chaos speak. Invoices from speech therapists, highlighted line items, dates running from toddlerhood into elementary school, payment plans, interest, missed sessions circled in red where I'd had to choose rent instead. At the top, I placed the total. Not rounded. Exact. Then came the note. One line. Printed. No signature. Pay this. Then we'll talk. I sealed the envelope and felt nothing. No relief. No fear. Just a quiet certainty that this was the most honest thing I'd ever sent them. 3 days later, my phone exploded. Missed calls from my mother. Voicemails stacked on top of each other like panic. Aaron, please call me back. We don't understand this. This feels aggressive. Aggressive. My father left one message. Only one. His voice was tight, angry, stripped of warmth. This is not how family communicates. I let them sit. All of them. Unheard. Unanswered. Claire was next. Her text came at midnight. What did you send Mom and Dad? I stared at the screen, then replied. Paperwork. Her response was immediate. They supported you in other ways. I laughed out loud. It startled my son. Invisible ways, I muttered. She called me the next morning. You're being unfair, she said without preamble. They're scared. So was I said. For 8 years. This isn't the same, she insisted. They're older. Vulnerable. And he was 3. I could hear her breathing now. Sharp. Controlled. You're punishing them, she said. No, I replied. I'm itemizing. You always do this, she snapped. You turn everything into an attack. That's interesting, I said calmly. Because all I sent was evidence, she scoffed. You expect them to just pay that? I expect them to do what they asked of me, I said. Help. There was a long silence. They can't afford this, she said finally. Neither could I. I'm not asking them to afford it, I said. I'm asking them to acknowledge it. They raised you, she said again, like a spell. And then they decided who was worth funding. She hung up. That night, my mother emailed me. An email, not a call. She called the envelope hurtful, said I was rewriting history, said love wasn't measured in receipts. I read it twice. Then I looked at the unpaid total highlighted at the top of the stack I'd kept for myself. Love may not be measured in receipts, but neglect leaves a paper trail. Weeks passed. No payment. No apology. Just silence heavy enough to bruise. At Thanksgiving, they didn't call. At Christmas, they sent a card with no message, just their names written carefully at the bottom like signatures on a contract they refused to sign. The envelope wasn't returned. They had received it. They just hadn't answered it. And that told me everything I needed to know about how much my son's voice was worth to them. Even now. It's been months. Not the dramatic kind where time crawls. Just ordinary days passing one after another, quietly confirming something I already knew. They still haven't paid. No check. No transfer. No attempt to negotiate or explain. Just absence. Stretched thin until it became a decision. The invoices are still in my cabinet. Same folder. Same order. The total hasn't changed. Sometimes I take it out just to confirm that I didn't imagine it, that this really happened, that I didn't overreact, exaggerate, dramatize. The math always holds. My mother stopped calling first. I noticed because she'd always been the one to reach out eventually, even if it was superficial. The silence felt intentional, protective, like distance was cheaper than accountability. My father sent one message a month later, one sentence. We don't think money should define family. I stared at it for a long time before locking my phone and setting it down. Money didn't define us. Their choices did. Claire unfriended me online. No announcement. I noticed when her updates stopped appearing, her perfectly curated life sliding out of view like I'd been edited from the frame. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she'd said I was holding the past hostage. I almost admired the phrasing. My son doesn't ask about them anymore. This surprises people when I say it, like children are supposed to miss absence by default. But he adapted early. He learned which questions didn't get answers. He learned which people didn't show up. Silence, for him, was a familiar language. The irony doesn't escape me. Now, when he speaks, it's careful, but clear. He pauses before words, like he respects their weight, like he understands that being heard isn't guaranteed. The first time he read out loud without stumbling, I didn't call my parents. There was no one to prove it to. They didn't earn that moment. Sometimes I imagine them opening the envelope again, rifling through the pages, hoping something has changed, hoping the total has shrunk, hoping time has erased obligation. It hasn't. Time only made it sharper. They wanted retirement security, predictability, comfort in old age. They wanted assurance that someone would show up when things got hard. I wanted therapy money for a child who couldn't pronounce his own name. We both asked for help. Only one of us was told no. People love to tell me I should be the bigger person. They say it like it's synonymous with forgiveness. Like bending is more noble than standing still. But I'm not being big or small. I'm being exact. They asked for support without conditions. I offered a condition they understood perfectly, because it was the same one they gave me. Pay this, then we'll talk. They've chosen silence instead. Every unpaid day is an answer. I don't chase them. I don't remind them. I don't follow up. The bill doesn't expire, and neither does memory. Sometimes I catch myself waiting, not for the money, but for the shift. The moment when they admit, even privately, that this was never about affordability. It was about priority. Until then, I wait. Not in hope, in clarity. Because the last time my parents spoke about family being priceless, they said it while protecting their savings. And the first time my son spoke my name clearly, it cost everything I had. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles in when everyone thinks the conflict is over, but you know it isn't. It's not peace. It's abandonment wearing patience like camouflage. I still get updates about them. Not directly. Never directly. Information leaks through the cracks the same way it always did. Through relatives who lower their voice. Through half sentences that end too fast. They're adjusting. Someone told me once, gently. Adjusting to what? Being untreated? Unanswered? They're disappointed. Another said, like that was supposed to land somewhere soft in me. Disappointed. I think of a 3-year-old in a vinyl chair trying to form a word his mouth didn't want to give him. I think of 8 years of swallowing stress so my son wouldn't learn it before the language. Disappointment is a luxury. They haven't paid. They haven't argued numbers. They haven't asked to meet halfway. Because meetings require accountability, and half measures suggest guilt. Instead, they wait me out. My mother sent a birthday card last spring. No money, no acknowledgement, just a neatly written message about the weather, as if normalcy could be reintroduced through stationery. My father signed his name beneath hers. Their handwriting hasn't changed. Mine has. It's steadier now. The bill stays where it is. Not framed, not dramatic, just present. I don't wave it around. I don't threaten with it. I don't reference it in conversation like a blade. I let it exist. Because it represents something they never expected me to demand. Consistency. They taught me consequences only applied downward, toward the child who chose practicality, who chose a smaller life, who chose a path that didn't impress donors or admissions boards. They never imagined those principles could reverse. The last message I received from my father was 6 words long. We hope you reconsider someday. Reconsider what? My son's worth? Their excuse? I typed a response 3 times, deleted it every time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because silence finally spoke their language better than words ever could. They wanted help without reminder. I wanted help without pleading. They say I've changed. They're right. Because I no longer explain myself to people who already understand exactly what they did. My sister hasn't reached out again. Her absence is louder than any argument we ever had. I imagine she tells the story differently now. Me as vindictive, unreasonable, cold. It doesn't bother me. She had access to their generosity. She doesn't get access to my restraint. My son asked me once why we don't visit Grandma and Grandpa anymore. Did I do something wrong? He asked carefully. That sentence almost broke me in half. No, I told him. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults make choices that show us who they care for most. Do they care about me? He asked. I held his face in my hands and looked at him dead on. I care about you, I said. And I always will. That was the only answer that mattered. Some nights, I imagine what it would look like if they paid. If the money appeared quietly in my account with no note attached. If the problem were solved numerically, like they always believed things could be, but it wouldn't fix what actually broke. Because the real debt was never financial. It was the moment they taught me my child's needs were optional, that my motherhood disqualified me from investment, that the words you chose, this were sufficient justification to step away. 8 years later, they're choosing again. They're choosing pride over reconciliation, comfort over repair, silence over responsibility. And I'm still waiting. Not because I expect them to change, but because waiting makes something visible every day they avoid it. It makes the imbalance undeniable. The bill remains unpaid. Their request remains unanswered. And for the first time in my life, the power never shifted back. I didn't close the door. I just stopped holding it open. Still waiting.